Whenever Jesus was talking to a large number of people, maybe even thousands of people, Matthew and Mark say that he only told stories. Isn't that fascinating? I don't know about you, but I love stories. Jesus was a wonderful storyteller. Let's get in touch with some of the more powerful stories of Jesus. Hi, my name is Father Mike Manning. I'm a Catholic priest. I'm a member of a community called the Society of the Divine Word. It's a missionary community of priests and brothers that work in over 70 countries around the world, working mainly with the poor, but also very concerned about using this thing called mass media as a way of getting into the lives of people who perhaps are not the churchgoers, but people who are called to be able to know the fullness of Christ. Well, I'm coming to you because I'm excited about Jesus. I've found in Jesus the center of meaning of my life. I've decided to give my life to Jesus, and it's been an experience of great joy and peace and great security, if you will. The security of knowing that despite all of my sinfulness, Jesus loves me and he forgives me, and the security of knowing that when I die, I'm going to be able to have eternity with God, and in a beautiful way, a wonderful connection with the people that I have known and loved throughout my life. That's the Jesus that I'm excited about. And knowing Jesus and getting to have a relationship with him is something that happens in a strong way through my relationship with the Bible. The Bible is a wonderful example of men and women who have encountered God. And when you get to the Christian Bible, you have some very significant people that have encountered God. I like to think of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John as individuals who, going through their life and doing all the things that you and I do, all of a sudden something happened. They ran into something. And the person that they ran into was Jesus. And somehow Jesus became, I like to use this image. I love to sail in a boat, and I don't get to do it very often, but my memory of the times that I did were so great. I can remember up in Michigan being with my cousin Jack and sitting in the back of the boat in Dewey Lake, and the sail is there, and all of a sudden the wind gets into the sail, and I'll grab the rudder, and you can feel the current, and you can feel the pressure on the sail and on the rudder. And as I turn the rudder, I'm able to direct the boat. I can get it to move over to the left, or I can move it to the right, starboard or port, whatever you want to say. I'm not that much of a sailor. But moving in those directions, I've been able to find, honestly, that Christ has become my rudder, if you will. In Christ, I can find a direction, a meaning, a hope, a security, a peace that allows me to find what I'm looking for in life. And what I'm looking for is that security, that peace, that joy, and that love that I think we all want. Well, I'm going on, but I hope that shows you my orientation in life. My orientation in life is Jesus. He's the center of my life, and the instigator and the push, if you will, that brings me to try as best I can to use mass media, to ride my motorcycle, to have my friends, to do all the things that I do centered on Christ. Well, as you look at the Bible and you look at Christ and the encounters, it's really good to look at one person by the name of Luke. Luke was a person who was a Gentile. He was a person who was a physician. He was also a historian, but he was also a person who had a very, very deep and tender love for Christ. And he desired to tell as many people as he could. And so that's what the Gospel of Luke is about. And, this is important, not only did he write about the life of Jesus as he lived in Galilee and down in Jerusalem, but he also wrote the Acts of the Apostles, which is the story of what happened after Jesus ascended into heaven, the story of what went on in the early church in those beginning years with Peter and with Paul, and trying to get the message beyond just Israel, getting it into Syria, getting it into Lebanon, getting it into Turkey, getting it into Greece, getting it even into Rome. That whole message and understanding that outreach. Well, when I started studying the Gospel of Luke, I found a fascinating thing. That one of the things that Luke brought forth as this great historian was the fact that Jesus was a great storyteller. Mark and Matthew both tell that whenever Jesus was in front of a large group of people, and we get an intimation that when I say a large group of people, we're talking possibly of 15,000 plus men, women, and children standing and listening to this man tell his stories. Matthew and Mark said he only told stories when he was in the large group. Well, I don't know about you, but stories are great, aren't they? I have to admit to you that I've got a thing called Netflix on my television, and when I get home at night, usually it's late in the hour, before I go to bed, I love to watch a good television story, a good mystery, a good novel that allows me to be able to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And there's something about those stories, on whether it's a movie, a TV program, that helps me to get to some truth. I believe people who write things are conveying things, and if it's a good story, I think this can bring me very close to Christ, and that's what it's about. A story has a lasting effect. A story can get into your gut, and it can start to allow yourself to think, and even as you're going to sleep, start to think about new things. Well, Luke wanted to accentuate the power of Jesus, the storyteller. And get this, of all the four Gospels, Luke has 11 distinctive parables that are just told by Luke. Just stories that Jesus told, and again, these many stories, 11 of them were just told by Luke. And you know what I'd love to do? I'd love to, maybe pick one or two or three of these parables of Jesus and see if maybe we can get into the understanding of who he was and what he was trying to convey. One of the best stories, and again, now I'm gonna tell you the story. Now I want you to do this. I want you to imagine, maybe even close your eyes, and let's say you're on a hill up in Galilee, up in present-day Israel, and you've heard about this person, Jesus. And you've heard that he can heal your sickness, and you're concerned about that. But also, he's a good storyteller. He can tell a story that can really pivot you and bring you through the force of that story into a truth, into an understanding that's very great. And so let's look at just a handful of these stories and see if through the stories we can get a little bit of an insight into this Jesus that I love so very much. I'm going to tell you, first of all, the story of the Good Samaritan. But before I get into that, I'm going to ask you to listen to this message, if you will, and then come back, because I'm going to give you some insight into what this story of the Good Samaritan is about, and how Christ is speaking to you and to me today in a powerful way. Please stay tuned. I have a very dear friend. His name is Father Marty Padovani. Father Marty is a counselor. For many years, he's been able to work with individuals, but also with couples. And he's written a book, Healing Wounded Relationships, that is kind of the wealth of his deep insights through many years into how to make relationships work. I know that you and I can relate very well to those relationships which have been wounded, which are sometimes even bleeding. Listen to some of the topics that he has in here. Just simple things on communication, listening, intimacy, forgiveness, reconciliation, dealing with anxiety and fear, and a very practical question: how do you make a marriage work? Oh, I know you are going to be enriched. I want to send it to you. I want you to be able to be blessed by this book, and I know you will be. For your donation of $15, pick up the phone right now. You see the number. Listen, this, I really believe, can change your life. One time there was a priest. He was living in Jerusalem, and he was working around in the temple doing things that priests do. And his boss came into him and said, listen, I want you to go down to Jericho, and I want you to get down in Jericho, and I want you to preach down there. He said, well, I want you to make sure you get a good collection, because we need a lot of money here back in Jerusalem in the temple. Would you please go down to Jerusalem and do it right away? I'm down to Jericho and do it right away. Priest said, sure, doing that. And he said, well, do you mind if I bring along my friend, the Levite, kind of the helper, if he could come along with me? And his boss said, sure, you can do that. So he just gets all ready, and he comes to the Levite, and he says, come on, let's go. And the Levite says, oh, shoot. He says, there were a whole bunch of people in here for a class, and there's papers, and there's a bunch of trash around. I'm going to have to work. You go out, and you go ahead. Well, the priest said, okay. But then he started thinking, whoa, the road from Jerusalem down to Jericho, and Jericho is down at the bottom of the earth. It's the lowest place, one of the lowest places on the earth. There's all kind of hills, and it's really a dangerous road, because robbers can come out, they can get you, bam, and then they can run into the hills, and you can never find them. It's really a scary thing. But he's got to do his job. His boss told him he needed to go down and preach down in Jericho. So he says to the Levite, listen, I'm going to go ahead because I got to hurry down there, but you do whatever you can, get things straightened out, and then you come. So the priest gets going, and he's looking around, and he's got all kind of fancy clothes on because, he's a priest, and he's looking really, really good. And he's walking down this road, looking over in the hills, kind of scared to death that maybe there's going to be some robbers. And he gets halfway down the road, and he looks down. Oh my God. And there up ahead, he's not sure, but is that a body? And he comes in, and there's a naked man laying there, and he's been beaten up, and he's filled with blood, and oh my God, it's terrible. And he starts thinking to himself, whoa, I don't know if I should be able to stop. And if I do stop, I bet you those robbers are just waiting, and I bet you that's even fake stuff on there, that he might not even be, this is going to be a decoy, and they're going to try and catch me, so I'm going to walk around that guy. I'm not going to be tricked by that man, I'm going to go on. And he walks away. Well, Finally, the Levite finishes what his job is, and he's coming along too. And he's coming along, he's walking along because he wants to catch up with the priest. And all of a sudden, boom, he comes to this guy laying there, naked, all beaten up. And he wasn't sure what to do. But he looks over and he sees the priest way down the road, and he says, oh, if I stop with this man, I might even lose my job because that guy, And so he walks around him, he walks around him. And as he's walking around, he looks back. And when he looks back, he sees that there's a man there walking with a donkey. And he says, pointing to the guy on the ground, making sure that he'll go get him, And then he runs off. Well, the man that is coming on in the donkey, it turns out that he's a Samaritan. Well, now Samaritans are people who are really kind of the enemies of the Jews of Jerusalem. There was a law that a Samaritan shouldn't even come into the temple in Jerusalem, and that a Jew from Jerusalem shouldn't talk to a Samaritan. There had been something that happened 700 years before, and there was real prejudice and awkwardness. And here's this Samaritan, this enemy of the Jews, and he doesn't know what to do. So he says, I just can't leave you there. And so he picks the man up, gets him on his shoulder and puts him on his shoulder, and then he puts him onto the donkey. And when he was coming down, he remembered that there was a motel. Oh, it was maybe a mile back. And he said, oh, I'll have to do that. And so he puts the man, holds him on the donkey, and then turns the donkey around and goes back to the motel. He gets to the motel, and he's given him part of his jacket to cover him up, because remember, he was naked, and he covers him up with the clothes that he has, like that. And he comes to the owner of the motel, and he says, this man is really bad. He said, could he stay here with you? And he says, I'm going to have to go back to Jerusalem and see if I can find a doctor, and maybe a doctor can come and help him, because, he might die right here on the spot. Jesus told that story, and it's a story that goes not just in that world there, but it's a story that goes to you and me today. A story that challenges you and me, that asking the question, who are some of the people that are beaten up and on the side of the road and are forgotten and are not being cared for? Who are the priests? Who are the Levites? The people that are going down to preach and do good things, and leaving that person that was in dire need because of, some other need. And then the other question comes, who's the Samaritan today? Who's the person that really stands out in our life as caring for the ones that nobody else cares for? Nobody thinks about them, And this Samaritan does that. Well, I've got to believe that when Jesus told these stories, he didn't come up and he didn't start to say, I don't want you to be like the priest or the Levite or the robber. He just told the story, and that's the power of stories, because stories, when they just come and they hit us, they start with all of their little ramifications and little notices here and there. They get down to our hearts, and they allow us to be able to hear a message that is good. You and I have to be so very careful that we don't forget people that are hurting in our life today. We can have all kind of great aspirations of doing wonderful things, but maybe we need to live right in the now. And if there's someone in our life, we need to change our plans, just like the Samaritan did. Change our direction to care for the people that are in front of us, that are hurting, that are in great need. Oh, Jesus, keep telling stories, and may these stories change my life. I have a very dear friend. His name is Father Marty Padovani. Father Marty is a counselor. For many years, he's been able to work with individuals, but also with couples. And he's written a book, Healing Wounded Relationships, that is kind of the wealth of his deep insights through many years into how to make relationships work. I know that you and I can relate very well to those relationships which have been wounded, which are sometimes even bleeding. Listen to some of the topics that he has in here. Just simple things on communication, listening, intimacy, forgiveness, reconciliation, dealing with anxiety and fear, and a very practical question: how do you make a marriage work? Oh, I know you are going to be enriched. I want to send it to you. I want you to be able to be blessed by this book, and I know you will be. For your donation of $15, pick up the phone right now. You see the number. Listen, this, I really believe, can change your life. But there's another story that we only find in Luke, and that's the story of the prodigal son. I like the prodigal son. Here's a son who has the guts to come up to his father and says, "Give me my inheritance," and then goes out and wastes it all. But even though he had wasted the father's wealth, the father was willing to accept him back. Oh boy, that's so important for you and me to know that when we've done something wrong, when we've kind of wasted the goodness and blessings of God in our life, we can know that God is always willing to embrace us and bring us back. There's another story, and I like this story, and it's the story of the Pharisee and the tax collector. And it's a story in the scene of the temple. The Pharisee is standing thanking God for all the good things that he does, giving money to the poor and helping all kind of people with his charitable acts. And then he looks over his shoulder and he sees a tax collector. And he said, "I'm not like that person," like that. The tax collector is in the back crying. And why is he crying? Oh, because he had done something that really was wrong. He had taken money from a family. And in the process, the taxes that he was expecting, a little girl died, a daughter in the family, because they didn't have enough money because the taxes were taken to care for her health. And he comes back and he just stands in the back of church just crying, tears coming down his eyes. "Oh, Lord, I'm a sinner." And Jesus compares the two of them. He compares the two, this Pharisee who does all kind of great things, and then he got this terrible sinner. And Jesus says, that sinner, that tax collector, that's the one that faced the truth. That's the one that faced God, the need of God in his life. And you and I are called to not be the Pharisee, but to be the true repentant sinners in our life. Well, we got some wonderful people that have written into us, that have called up and wanted to share their faith with us and share their story and have miracles happen. Jim from Illinois, he's got a decision to make and he's praying that we'll pray together with him. Victoria in Oregon needs strength to go on. That's the simple thing, huh? Mary in Georgia, she's praying for a better relationship with her daughter. California, Rosa, praying for herself. She needs to deal with the anger she's in her life. Lord, take care of us all. Watch over us like that father of the prodigal son. And may Jesus' love for you always make you smile.
The conductor stands before the orchestra, poised with baton in hand. and the notes lie silent on the pages of the score, waiting to be played by the band. And the spirit of a symphony's composer waits in notes upon the pages. And the knowledge and the skill of a conductor unlocks right interpretation. The conductor knows the whole orchestra, as each player knows the instrument he plays, and with wisdom calling forth performances that surpass the finest of former days. And he knows when to fiercely command, like a captain with his soldiers. And he knows when to be gentle as a lamb, like a lover with his beloved. And Jesus is the conductor, and the church is an orchestra of God. And the liturgy we pray becomes a symphony, and the sacraments unlock the mystery of God. And the spirit of the symphony's composer waits in notes upon the pages. And the knowledge and the skill of the conductor unlocks right interpretation.